Welcome to episode 53 of the AMT podcast. Today I want to talk about whether or not horse racing is still profitable in 2024 and going forward. I've already done an episode explaining how government tyranny is crippling betting markets with these new draconian cookie cutter affordability checks. But the knock-on effect hasn't extended to all markets. Cricket's still booming, as is football, as far as I'm aware. But racing has noticeably been hit the hardest. Liquidity's just been decimated over the last couple of years. I don't have facts and figures on hand, but as an active participant, I'd guess that liquidity's dropped by nearly 50%. And as a consequence, the in-play markets have a lot more gaps. There's a lot less money available for getting matched. Pre-race markets are a lot more volatile. And ultimately, it's just a lot harder to be precise with your entry and exit points since it's harder to get matched at the desired price. So some of the strategies which I've long relied upon have become almost obsolete. They don't work as well as they used to. I used to be, for the lack of a better term, a Betfair specialist. And by that, I mean I would just take advantage of the momentum of the price movements. So for pre-race, I would just look at the support and the resistance points and just ride the coattail of the momentum of drifting or steaming prices. But now it's a lot harder to do that since liquidity is so much thinner. So before, where I'd be able to jump on for, say, 500 to £1,000 stakes, I can't do that anymore without chasing the price and losing value, which has a detrimental impact to your bottom line, especially pre-race when you're only looking to capture a handful of ticks. So the only way around that is to lower your stakes. Another strategy which I relied on heavily was scalping, where I'd just sit either side of the price during stable price action and just collect ticks one at a time, just back into laying either side of the price. But like I said, due to lower liquidity, there's more volatility now. There's a lot of breakouts and prices just aren't as solid as they used to be. Scalping is still possible, but it's a tool that's really only worth using on the bigger meetings where prices are more solid due to more information on offer and the media coverage. But having said that, not even the big meetings are as stable as they used to be. Meetings like Cheltenham, the Royal Ascot Grand National, traded far differently this year than they ever have done. And I think there's estimates out there suggesting that liquidity at the Gold Cup was around 20% lower than the previous year. So as a consequence, there were a lot more breakouts in the price action, and they weren't as stable as previous years. So for scalpers like me, who've long relied on using this strategy, this year was probably my worst year pre-race at Cheltenham. I'm not going to say scalping is totally obsolete. It just means I'm going to have to pick my spots more and pivot. And that's just the nature of the markets. This has happened to me a few times over the years, especially on horse racing. Edges tend to dwindle over the time as new participants enter the market. So it's just a question of whether you can adapt or you just die out. And as far as in-play racing goes, in-play's always been a lot less liquid than pre-race for the obvious reasons that it's practically impossible for the average punter to jump in the market at a fair price in play, especially with bookmakers, where there's a big time lag and when the action is happening so fast, especially on the flat racing. But I've always traded using the price ladders, using third-party vendors like Geeks Toy. So similar to pre-race, I relied a lot on reading the flow of the money, even in play, as opposed to understanding what's happening in the race. And there was just sufficient liquidity for me to just jump in front of the prices, get matched and hedge up at better odds. And I was doing that for many years consistently until, of course, liquidity dried up to a point where you'd be lucky to get 20 quid matched at odds higher than 6.0. So trading based off momentum today it's not the same as it was before. The liquidity just isn't there. And if I continue to use the same stakes, then I'm just going to have to eat bigger losses along the way when trades go against me, as I'm going to have to chase my way out to get matched. So just like pre-race, my profits dwindled until I was forced to revise my strategies. I then came to the realization that in order to stay profitable at racing, I'm going to have to be able to predict what's going to happen beforehand. In other words, after all these years, I'm finally going to have to fundamentally understand the variables that influence a race. And that's something I've put off for a long time. Friends and family have long been baffled by the fact that I've been able to make money on racing without knowing anything about it. Everyone always used to message me during Cheltenham, Ascot, or the Grand National asking for tips. And it got pretty tiresome having to explain what cold trading is. But now I finally understand the the racetracks and the horses. And I have a knack for spotting drifters and steamers. And I even post my trades sometimes on the weekends on Substack to my premium subscribers who can copy my position. So if that's something that interests you, you can subscribe to the link that I'm going to post in the description. I've always treated trading as more of an art than science. I much prefer reading the state of play and the momentum of price action instead of digging through and analyzing data sets, which is boring for me and especially hard since I'm not used to doing it. So having to go through data at this stage of my trading kind of feels like I'm going back to the drawing board. So is racing still worth it in 2024 and beyond? It absolutely is. And the reason why I'm sharing my journey is not to tell you that you should give up or not even bother just because the landscape has changed. It is harder and the mug money just isn't there like it used to be. So in my opinion, fewer people are going to make good money going forward. The scalpers and liquidity providers like me have had their day in the sun, and I fully accept that. There's no point complaining about it or, talking about past glories. You either have to give it up or pivot and find new ways to make money. As one door closes, another opens. I've made multiple 5 figures just off 3 events alone. The Gold Cup, Royal Ascot, and the Grand National. And the point I'm making is that even though scalping isn't as profitable as it used to be, swing traders now get to enjoy the more volatile action at these events. And some of my trading associates can attest to that. So going forward, I'm just going to have to be far more selective with my entries and get used to swing trading the momentum and winding down on my staking during the midweek events. And when it comes to in-play action, just because there's not enough liquidity left in order for me to ride the price momentum as I used to, I've still been able to keep my nose in front by going back to the drawing board and sharpening my understanding of racetracks and the horses. So for example, I've been grouping race courses by likeness in terms of how stiff the fences are or how hilly or stiff the race course is, whether it's got sharp bends or long sweeping bends that either suit nimble horses or horses that take bigger strides, how the going of the ground varies in extremity from ground to ground, what segment of the race course the horse is most likely to struggle. And by grouping the race courses in this manner, it's helped my race card reading ability, because now I can scan through a race card and I can look at a horse's form and assess the significance of their form by seeing how they run at the same track or similar tracks to the one they're racing at on the day. And then I couple that racetrack knowledge with information I have on the horse, for example, what weight they're carrying, whether they're up or down in trip, whether they like to front run or be held up, whether that horse's price action historically drifts or steams and by how much. Because I've taken the painstaking steps of having to go back to the drawing board and build myself back up, I now have the skill set to survive the new trading landscape. Now, I had to force myself to do it in the beginning. It was boring and it took a lot of time before things started to take shape. And ego kind of played a part as well. Having to relearn things, having done this for so long, it does take a knock on your pride because you feel like an amateur again. But there can't be any ego when it comes to making money. And even though looking at data sets are not my passion, it actually does become oddly satisfying being able to spot value looking through data that the naked eye just can't spot. I still wouldn't class myself as a purely data-driven trader, but for a sport that's become as cutthroat as racing, where you need every edge at your disposal, it's a step I've been forced to take. So 2024 and beyond, race trading profitably is absolutely still profitable. Yes, it's a lot harder. Yes, there's less money going through the markets, but it's important not to rest on your laurels. Understand the sport in its entirety. It's probably one of the hardest sports to get right, but at the end of the day, it's the only sport that's on daily. So you don't need a big bankroll. And if you have an edge and if you turn over enough money, the lure of a potentially daily or weekly income is very possible. The changes that's happened have also been a big motivating factor in me revamping my video training course, where I'm posting videos there almost weekly in order to show my new methodology. But if you're feeling lazy and you want me to do the legwork for you, then consider being a subscriber to my newsletter where I post trades regularly. Links to my course and newsletter are in the description below. That's my 2 cents. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know how you guys have coped with the new trading landscape with regards to racing or whatever sport you trade. So leave a comment, like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.